Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled and honored to have on a former Olympian, former Maccabiah Games athlete. She's a behavioral therapist and also an award-winning filmmaker, as well as co-director and producer of the fascinating documentary about her life called Parting the Waters. Please help me welcome Michele Kuvin Kupfer. And Michele, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and what a wonderful introduction. So
well earned. so everything I read about you is just so incredibly fascinating. So we have a lot to cover, but I want to start by going back with you. So, and you and I spoke a little bit before, and so you grew up in Florida, and you said Palm Beach.
Yes. So, we moved to Florida. Well, my mother's a Holocaust survivor. My father studied in England at Cambridge in the London School of Tropical Medicine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Discovered the fluorescent antibody test for malaria and came to America at the NIH, then University of Miami. And they came to Miami because my mother had a lot of breathing issues. So they thought Florida would be good. And, the story goes, 4 kids in 5 years. How am I going to support these kids? And my dad heard about this guy who was giving up his practice in Palm Beach, which was not that far from Miami. He didn't really know much about it, and he decided to take it. He's also a cardiologist and internal medicine doctor, and became the doctor of the island of Palm Beach. And my dad was a real character. He was ahead of his time. He made house calls. You would call him up with any type of problem. He was not just a medical doctor. He seemed to be the psychiatrist. He took care of everybody's problems. We were on the island, which was quite an experience.
Okay, so you just mentioned, this is what I was going to ask you about anyway, and you brought it up now. So you're the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, your mom. Okay, so can you talk about that a little bit, and her experiences a little bit?
Yeah, my mother came from a very well-known family in Berlin, Leiser. They owned the big shoe company in Berlin, and they had a wonderful life. My grandmother was one of 3, and her father, they were wealthy. They had a wonderful life. And I found my grandmother's diary when she was a young adult. And it was, going to the opera and tea and friends. And her best friend, Margot, married her brother. So they were all this really wonderful group of people, and their lives were really wonderful. Then my grandmother marries a doctor, an only child, and they started a family, my mother and her brother. Things already were getting bad in the, 1934. And my grandfather was a beloved doctor. He actually had to sleep at patients' houses, Christian patients, to survive, not to be picked up. But my grandmother's family would not leave Germany. They figured that they would pay off. They loved it. This would not affect, they were scared, and they had all these
fleeting. It would just go by.
Right. But they were too afraid to leave. This was their home. And I think that, a lot of people feel that way. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until December of 1939 that my grandmother got a visa last minute and made the very difficult decision to save her family, her husband, my mother, and her brother. And they got to Amsterdam. And then by Amsterdam, they got to America. And unfortunately, her parents, my grandmother's parents were killed. My grandfather's parents were killed. Her brother was killed, and they all went to Auschwitz. We know that the parents and my uncle were killed right away, but my aunt, my grandmother's best friend, survived 5 years in a concentration camp, and came to America to live with my grandmother for a while, and my mom, and ended up living near us as they aged. My grandmother, and we called her Tanti, Uma and Tanti, were a big part of our lives growing up. And it was I think about it a lot. I talk about it in the film, how it affected me. I would sit, especially with Tanti, because she had no children. We were like her grandchildren. And I could feel, I felt like I could feel the pain. I don't know. It felt almost not real. That why could I feel this as a 15-year-old just by holding her hand? I felt very close to her. And we would go to Israel for 4 or 5 months a year, and Tanti and Uma would come for some of that. And it really was the only place that they, and my mother, 100%, that was where they felt the most comfortable.
So I was about to ask that. So I've interviewed many children of Holocaust survivors, and it's such a different range of experiences in their household. With some that, they said that they talked about it a lot, and some said there was always this, they didn't talk about it at all, that there's always this cloud hanging over the family house. So how was it in your household?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were a very creative family. My father had a camera in his hand all the time, which you'll see when you watch our film, which is full of archival footage. So my sisters and I also have a brother, but the three of us girls were a little older. We wanted to get the story. We wanted my grandmother and aunt to talk. And we tried desperately to have them give us more, even when at Yad Vashem in the 80s, when they opened up where you could see if you could find survivors. We brought my grandmother and aunt there, and they did actually found people, but they would not talk about it in detail at all. And my mother, she was a child, but grew up in this house of depression, really. My grandmother really fought with depression her whole life. And my mother was a part of that. So my mother also wouldn't talk about it. And it was hard. We wanted to know more. And my parents aren't alive. And I regret not getting more information from them. My mother was I'm never going to Germany. Germany's terrible. I can't deal with Germany. But we pushed her. When in her 70s, she was invited back as a survivor, and she and my father and her brother and his wife went back to Germany. And it was a really good healing moment for my mom. And also living in Israel in the 70s and 80s, I think, there was so much kindness coming from a lot of Germans from the next generation that wanted to support Israel, that wanted to be forgiven for their parents' and grandparents' sins.
The sins of the past.
So I think there was a little bit of breathing room there, but for my mother, but only when she was in Israel did she feel that she could breathe. And she spoke German. She had a whole a group of German friends in Israel, and where they would speak German. She just was, I think, freer, but she never felt that she was home until she started being in Israel more.
Oh, that's good. You said something that just we grew up the same way in my household, that we don't go to Germany, we're not going to buy German products and everything like that. And it was always my thing that I'm never going to go. And recently, I started changing my opinion about that as well. Like, I recently interviewed someone from the COO of March of the Living, and, I never thought I would want to, and now I do want to go and just, show that, hey, we made it.
Well, I took it a step further. It started, when one of my sister's kids, who was the oldest grandchild, wanted to get German citizenship because she wanted to potentially study abroad. My mother was not well at the time, and she's like, I'm never going to help you do this. But I decided to take it on to help any of the grandkids to see if they wanted to do this. I personally wanted to take back something that was taken away from my mom. Right. And I wanted to become a German citizen. I also think it was a great thing for our children. The world is small. It's an EU passport. We were thinking, and many of them have studied abroad. For me, we grew up listening to German. My parents would speak German to each other, but never to us. But there was something in my head that I had German. So both my grandparents were honored with the Stolperstein, which is the marker by the house that they were taken from. It's sort of a in the ground stone, beautifully carved out. There's a 5-year waiting list for people to get them. It's an amazing experience. Both my grandparents' homes are still there, and so just this last May, not even a year ago, we went for my grandfather, and I have been studying German for the last year and a half, and I actually gave the speech in German. And what I said was that German used to be a language of hate and death to me. It was a terrible language. But as I learned more German, it became softer. And I had friends, and it was a really healing moment for me.
Very, very interesting. Very fascinating that you did that. That's incredible. Now, what were your experiences growing up with, I like to usually start off with this, but I had other things with you. How was your experience with Judaism? Because also with Holocaust survivors, a lot of them did not, believe, did not want it, like they felt like the religion abandoned them, so they're going to abandon their religion. So how was it in your household? Were you observant at all?
So both my parents came from these, very small families. My father's parents were from Poland. His father died when he was 4 years old. He grew up just with his mother and brother. So family was everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, my mother used to say, I want to replace the 6 million Jews. She would have had 100 kids if she could have. Religion was definitely, it wasn't so much religion, but culturally, Zionism was a huge part of our life. But every Friday night, we would have Shabbat dinner. We would go to synagogue. Back then in Palm Beach, there was a Reform synagogue in West Palm Beach that we went to, and my mother was very involved. My mother did feel very connected to Judaism. She was the one driving that force. My father was really, and they were both so Zionistic that was the biggest pull. But yes, I would say, we grew up in a Reformed house.
But connected, you felt it.
Did. My father started all sorts of Jewish organizations in Palm Beach, Hebrew University, and all sorts of things, and opened up a big center in Israel for infectious diseases, where he got the money from all his patients in Palm Beach. And it wasn't until 1970 when my father had been to Israel before, but my mother had not. And in 1970, my father was asked to speak at Hebrew University. They went. We did not go. We were 4 little kids, and that changed my mother's life. It changed her life. I talk about this in the movie. You see this in the movie, but they came back, and from that point on, from that year on, we were in Israel 3 to 4 months a year at least. And they bought an apartment, and Israel became, for me, I could not understand why we would go to Israel and then come back to Palm Beach. Thought they were crazy. Why would we come back to this island that was so anti-Semitic and whatever? And I think my parents would have liked to stayed in Israel 12 months a year, but you had to make a living, and this is how my father was able to do it. Yeah.
Well, okay. You're doing great because you're anticipating my next question. Always. So on your website, there are a couple of things that struck me, and one of them is that you said that you dealt with anti-Semitism a lot as a kid. So what were your experiences? That was in Palm Beach. You felt it a lot there?
Yes. So when we moved to Palm Beach, it was in the 1960s. And my father was the doctor on the island. And it's an island. It's only 13 miles long and a half a mile wide. And it is not really the real world. It's very wealthy. It's beautiful. You're on the beach. You feel like this is not the real world. And there are lots of clubs on the island, these private clubs, which I was like, and I would go with my father all the time on house calls because we loved seeing all the big houses and meeting these famous people. And there were 2 instances that stood out to me very sharply. One is I was a swimmer. And when I was young, I wanted to join the swim team. And there was a swim team a half a mile away at one of the clubs, the Sailfish Club. Well, they didn't allow Jews.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't swim there. So my mother had to drive me 30, 40 minutes to get on a swim team because I could not swim at the swim team. I mean, that's just one example. There were many, which I won't give away that I talk about in the film. But when we moved to Palm Beach, the Jewish population was not very big. There was not a synagogue on the island. You had to go off the island for that. My parents were part of bringing all that to Palm Beach. Now Palm Beach is well over 50% Jewish, but back then it wasn't. And my father took care of all of these people who he couldn't. We once went to a house call, and I waited in the car. I was in my bathing suit. And I said, Dad, this looks so fun. It was like this one of these clubs. And I said, gosh, I want to go in here. And my dad says, no, I can treat the patients, but I can't eat dinner there. And I'm like, why? And he said, because we're Jewish. And I said, how can we live here? How can we live in a place that treats people like that? And, look, it was a way, I think my parents struggled with that. My mother certainly did. My father made a living. This was how he made a living. He was a Depression baby. He had nothing when he started off. So I think for him, it was a job he actually loved. He met some incredible people, and it allowed him to do the things that were important to him. He opened up a center in Israel, which is one of the biggest center for infectious diseases. He was allowed to do all these things that he wanted to do.
So you did feel it overtly, not just like Jews aren't allowed here, but you felt it from like the populace. You felt it from other people, like disdain or something.
I felt it at swim meets through my peers who would say mean words, make fun of me. A lot of teasing, a lot of name calling in school, and at the swimming team that I swam for. I was the only Jewish member of that team until my brother joined, and it was hard at times. It was really hard, and my only savior was that I knew we were leaving for Israel at a certain point.
So, when did you first start saying, hey, swimming is something that I want to do? How, I'd like to get involved in this. And even more importantly, when did you first start realizing that you're pretty good at doing this?
Well, when you grow up in Florida, you kind of have to know how to swim. Sure. So we all swim. We moved there when my brother was born, and he basically swam before he could walk. So we were all really good swimmers. I was a really hyperactive kid. I had a lot of learning problems. I'm second out of four, and there are three girls and a boy, and I'm the second one. So I'm wedged in between my two sisters. We're very close in age. My sisters happened to be incredibly good at school, and I wasn't. I was not. I was actually really bad. I had severe learning issues, and I was hyperactive, but I was a really good athlete. Like, I would always be at the top of the class when it came to sport. And I loved swimming. Again, Florida, we lived on the beach, we had a pool, I was under the water all the time. And we all started swimming on a swim team early, but again, we had to go off the island to do that. But it was a way for me to get my energy out, I felt good in the water, where I didn't feel good outside of the water. I felt inadequate. I had a lot of problems at school. I was teased. I was held back. All sorts of things. Around, I would say, 11, I realized that I was actually a really good swimmer. I was winning. I was going to these swim meets that weren't just the local swim meet, but the state swim meets. And I was becoming a really good swimmer. And I think, by 12, 13, it was apparent that I had some talent and worked really hard and wanted to be a really good swimmer.
So you definitely did a lot of competitions at that stage.
Oh, yes. I mean, swimming, by 12, 13, I was swimming for the, AAU team, not just the school team, but the more serious swimmers who would meet before school, sometimes after, 3 times a week we did before and after, on the weekends. And, this was hard. I mean, my mom, before I could drive, was going back and forth. And then around 14, we would go to Israel. And I said to my dad, I can't stop swimming for 4 months. So that's when I joined the local team, which was Hapoel Imka, YMCA in Jerusalem. Had a really good swim team. For anybody who's been to Jerusalem back in the day, and the YMCA is just one of the most iconic places to visit.
Is that where you lived? You lived in Jerusalem when you were there?
Jerusalem. We have a home in Jerusalem. We still do.
We still do. I live in Jerusalem as well. That's where we lived when.
Yeah. So we're not far from the Y. And but back in the 70s, the pool was in the basement of the YMCA, and it was not a pleasant pool. It was barely 25. I don't even think it was 23 meters. And it was in the basement. And I would usually come home with all these red dots on me because, it was so chlorinated. But we swam there. Then some more pools started to appear in Jerusalem at Ramat Rachel and the kibbutz.
I went to Ramat Rachel. I was there.
Oh yeah, I mean love Ramat Rachel. So our team, we had a great team, but it was I was sort of in this. We used to talk amongst ourselves with my siblings that we had sort of a little bit of a schizophrenic life. We go to Israel, come back to our life in America, which were very different. And I wasn't 100% accepted in Israel either. They saw me on the swim team as coming in and being this really good swimmer. And why you're not here all the time? What's that about? So it was a hard balance.
So what prompted the going to Israel again? You can just go because you kept going back and forth.
Right.
Prompted in the first place.
So it started off that my father was invited by Hebrew University to go. He was a lecturer all around the world, and he became very good friends with Abe Harmon, who was the president at the time, and had this idea of opening a center for infectious diseases at the Hebrew University. And he did just that. In 1973, they bought a home. In 1976, his center was opened at Ein Kerem Hadassah. It is now one of the biggest centers. Well, it's the biggest in the region, but it is world class. And Golda Meir was there when it was open. Yigal Yadin was there. And it allowed my father to do all the things he loved and being able to support that. His patients, back in those days, Palm Beach was much more a winter resort. Right. People did not live there in the summer like they do now. So it was easy for him to leave in May and come back in September. And that's what we did. Sometimes we stayed even longer, and my dad would fly off and come back. And it was an amazing existence. But for me, I wanted to be in Israel all the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to come back to the States.
I got to give your parents credit, because this is at a time that they, took you to all these things. Because this is a time that it's not like now. My kids played travel ball, and it was such a commitment to get them to all the places they had to go all the time, and they were not nearly the level that you were at. So and back then, no one was doing it like now. So that was really some commitment that your parents had with you.
Well, to be honest, yes, it was a commitment for my parents, but not on a daily basis. In Israel, they didn't. I took my, in Israel, it's wonderful. At 11, we were riding the buses by ourselves. A much more independent life in Israel. And in Florida, it was a commitment getting me to these practices. And, my parents were so thrilled that in Florida, you could get your driver's license at a young age. And they're like, here, take it, go, because I'm not taking you to 4:30 practices anymore. But it was they saw how much it helped me. There were lots of struggles in between. And with swimming, school, which you'll see more about in the movie.
Right.
The film really does go through. I mean, my log line is it's a documentary about trauma, hope, and courage.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I'm going to speak about the film. So I'm just curious now. You started going to Israel. How did you first start coming to the attention of the Olympic Committee there? I mean, how did they first start noticing you, that saying, "Hey, we'd like to have her on the team"?
Yeah. So Hapoel Imka, our team in Jerusalem, was really good, and Israel has exactly what America has: national championships and all these different events. And I was, by 15, I was the fastest swimmer in Israel in certain events, and they were starting to build their Olympic team, which would be 1980. That was going to take place in Russia.
Right.
So 1978, they said to me, Michele, you're a really good swimmer, and you're here half the time, and we want you to make a decision. Do you want to swim for Israel or take your chances and swim for America? Mm-hmm. And I didn't even have to, I mean, it was like my dream came true.
I was going to say, how much part of you was like torn a little bit?
Not one bit.
Not one bit.
So first of all, I was a really good swimmer, and but I don't know what my chances would have been in America. Israel, it was interesting. Israel, if you go back and look at history of Jews, even Israelis and athletes, there are some amazing athletes in Israel. Always has been. Our team in 1980, we actually, as a team, were really good. We would have made a mark at the 1980 Olympics. We were traveling all over Europe and, getting in the top 16, getting in the top 8. Amir Ganiel, he was getting in the top 3. We were a really good team. And these are, so when I hit that national mark in Israel, I joined the national team. And these are swimmers from all over Israel, and we would travel together, we would train together. And by then, it was these were my closest friends. We would go and spend weeks on kibbutzim and train, and then we'd travel in Europe together. And that's when, they offered me become Israeli and swim for Israel. And I felt an out-of-body experience.
Right. How surreal was that for you? Like, I'm offering you a chance on the Olympic team.
Well, it was offering a chance at the Olympic team, but for me, it was also becoming Israeli, which of course we all can do as Jews, but this was like what I wanted my parents to do.
Right.
And yes, back then, athletes, it's the biggest stage for any sport is the Olympics, but it's not like today where I did great or I didn't do great and I'm going to try again in another 4 years. Back then you had that one shot. That was it. Nobody thought they were going to swim again until they're 21 or 25. For a period of time, we knew we were going for a little bit of time, but not that much time. But it was, it was a tough blow.
Well, yeah. So you're right. You're on the 1980 Israeli Olympic team. You're all set to compete in the Soviet Union. The boycott happens. Can you walk me through that a little bit? What the lead up to it? What were you hearing it at the time? What were the emotions? Your emotions, the team's emotions, and just how devastating was it?
I was 17, and I was a really anxious kid. Let's not forget about that. So, and we had been traveling with the national team during only 6 years after 1972 of Munich. Now, Mark Spitz was my hero. I loved him. But what happened in the games was so devastating and scary. Traveling with the Israeli team internationally was not a simple task. We had bodyguards. We couldn't speak Hebrew loudly. We had to be separated. We constantly were under guard, whether we were at the pool or walking the streets in London or in Germany. And it was scary. It was scary. I mean, but nobody talked about it.
I'm just going to, because I've interviewed someone from Team Israel baseball, and it's incredible. 40 years later, or 45 years later, still the same way now.
Exactly.
It's mind-boggling. But I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have lots of stories that I won't get into because, I want people to come to the film.
Of course, yes.
But when, and it took a lot. I think for all of us, it took a lot to get on that plane and travel and represent Israel. But it was so meaningful that we put that aside and we did it. We just all did it. Did not talk about it. We didn't talk about it. I brought it up to one of my buddies, Nir Shamir, who was a superstar swimmer, and we're good friends. And I said, did you ever think about, were you ever scared? He's a little older than me, and he wasn't so much. Part of it is personality. He's just a mellow type of guy, and he didn't worry about it like some of us, especially us girls, would worry about it. But when 1980, we knew things were not good. We listened to the news. We knew there was a real good chance Israel was going to follow America and not go. I never admitted it until I was older, but there was a part of me that was a little relieved. I was so scared that we would go to Russia and not be able to leave. Mm-hmm. I was scared that as the Israel team, something bad was going to happen in Russia. It wasn't like going to London or even Germany.
I get it. Right, sure.
But the overwhelming fact that this was my one chance of going to the Olympics and it wasn't going to happen was, just incredibly overwhelming, sad. We mourned, and we didn't have a lot of time to mourn because we as a team wanted to show the world that we were as good as we were. And that's when we put our energy towards the 81 Maccabiah Games.
Was there a part of you that felt so deflated, and it doesn't sound like there was from what you're saying, but that felt so deflated after 1980 that just said, I'm done, or is this, or that just totally fueled you for 81, for the Maccabiah Games?
Oh, no question about it. For a moment, for sure, it was like, what did I do all this for? I mean, here I was right at that cusp, of going. Again, not probably going to stand on the podium, but being part of this incredible experience, representing the country I love. I think all of us were like going to hang up our bathing suits. But swimming is not just at least for me and a lot of our team and a lot of swimmers, swimming is not just a physical sport. It is a real mental sport. It helps, like any sport, it helps you deal with stuff because you're under the water. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can hit that water as hard as you want. You just get it out. And by the time you're done, you're tired. And that was my goal. Like, how do I get myself tired and not thinking about all these thoughts that are going on in my head? Mm-hmm. And swimming did that for me. It does it for a lot of people, just like runners talk about that. They get in the zone. I think that's why sports are so important. I think it really allows people to, whether you're just a casual walker or tennis player or swimmer, you don't have to be an Olympian to feel that endorphin of a rush that makes you feel calmer and makes you think a little clearer. But our team made a conscious decision to not quit, not one of us, and move forward and go to the Maccabiah Games with our head high and show the world that we were, back then, the Maccabiah Games were truly the elite of sport. Mm-hmm. And, the best Jewish athletes in the world were coming to Israel for that. So it was not a given by any means that this was going to be an easy win for any of us. If anything, we had a lot of very tough competition. Athletes that went on to the next Olympics, both from Israel, America, Australia, South Africa, and that being part of the 1981 Maccabiah Games for me, felt like what the Olympics probably would have felt like.
So you did well, your team did well. Just how validating was it for you after that, after the disappointment of 80?
It was incredibly validating. I came back to the States. I swam for Indiana University, which of course was, a mecca for swimmers. That's where Mark Spitz went, and Doc Councilman. I swam for him his last year of coaching, but it wasn't really, I didn't say it a lot. Like, I was on the team in 1980 because I felt like, well, we didn't go. Do I really have the right to say that? And, I was swimming with many Olympians at Indiana University who went on to become, world record holders and amazing swimmers. And I didn't feel I was in that group. It messed with all of us in a way.
So you walked away for a while from swimming, and then decided to come back, which is the basis for your film, Parting the Waters. So what made you walk away to begin with?
Well, I walked away feeling that, I had a lot of pressure coming from lots of different angles, especially when in my age group. What are you doing for your career? How are you going to make a living? When are you starting a family? This is all these things coming at me. So I decided to try to put a little bit more focus onto my studies, which interestingly, college became a little bit easier for me. Not a lot, but it allowed me to study what I was interested in. And that gave me a little bit more confidence in my studies. However, never came easy. But I decided I wanted to give back to kids like me who struggle. So I studied behavioral science, special education, got a graduate degree, and life moved on very quickly. Met my husband, Gary. I was still feeling that anxiety. So I was exercising. And when I found a pool, I would swim, but it was hard, right? You're working all day. And so I wasn't swimming a whole lot. And life started catching up to us. So we started a family and had 3 kids. And I did start swimming a little bit in here and there, but swimming didn't come back until a little bit later. We had again, I don't know if you want to hear all the details of what came about, but we had a very rough beginning as parents with some illnesses and very, very stressful.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you're willing to talk about. I mean, you had with your own child as well, right?
Yes. And that took a lot of, we were young. My husband was a resident, a fellow in medicine, and then finally he's in academic medicine. So we were moving a lot. I was working part-time. We had these kids. Our son gets, a brain tumor, and, life stopped. Life stopped as it was and turned into something else. And the something else for me was, it was never going to be the same. It was not thinking about, am I going to thinking about next year or, a few years from now. We were trying to get to the next day, the next hour. And it changed my ability to have more freedom for myself. For many years, I didn't have that luxury.
Sure. So, part of the basis of the film is, right, that, you've undergone personal trauma yourself, which part of it led to you coming back. So let's talk about that, because what brought you back to wanting to, and how did you come to decide that I'm going to chronicle this in a film?
So I was working at Yale as a behavioral therapist. And my focus, even before our son got sick, has always been working with adolescents and young adults with chronic illness who the psychosocial issues that they face. We're really good. We're really good at saving kids' lives, but we're not good when they actually grow up and become adults, and they're not the cute little bald-headed kid anymore, but they have all kinds of problems with relationships, with learning, with the workforce, with independence. And we're not equipped. If you look at the statistics, kids with chronic illness cost more after all their treatment, but they still have issues, medical issues, than they did because they can't support themselves. And this was a huge issue for me. Even before our son got sick, then our son gets sick, and then it's even more of an issue because I'm seeing it both from a parental side and a professional side. And I was incredibly frustrated. So I have a good friend, Lisa Headley, who was Emmy nominated for the first film back 20 years ago, maybe even more, for HBO called Dwarfism, Not a Fairy Tale. It was really the first film that talked about what it's like to be a little person, really what it's like, not the seven dwarfs, not all these fantasies, but what it's really like. How hard is it? And she and I were walking on the beach one day and said, let's do something. I've got all the I know all the connections in the film industry. You've got all the connections in medicine, psychology. So we did. We started an educational site called Difference Diaries.
I was asked about that. Tell me.
DifferenceDiaries.net. And it is short little documentaries with an entire educational program attached to it, looking at lives of young people and what they deal with. It was amazing. We had huge success. We did lots of films for drug companies. I used that line, you saved the kid's life. What are you going to do for him now? Come on, you got to help him. So we were very, very successful with this. And I loved filmmaking. I just loved it. I thought, this is where I want to be, storytelling. We left Yale and came to Georgetown, my husband and I were supposed to, right at 2020 when COVID was rampant. Mm-hmm. And it was tough, right? We were all at home. Our son moved with us. He was not doing well. I did not want to be in this space anymore of mental health, and everything was on hold. So I had a lot of time to think, and I thought, and while this was going on, my best friend and swimming mate in Israel was very, very sick. So I kind of our team is very close, and I blurted out one day while we were on a WhatsApp group. I said, let for our 40th anniversary, let's get back in the water and swim. Let's just do it. I was trying to motivate my friend Leor. And then I said to myself, our team has this incredible story. And I think there's a film about this. And I also wanted people to know more about the Maccabiah Games. So I did a bunch of research. I pitched it to our team. They're like, make this film. Easy said than done. But we made this film. But it really wasn't until, I had my thesis statement, right? I mean, swimming was my thread, but I was more focused on telling the story of the Maccabiah Games, story of our team. And when it was time to get our editors, we struggled. We were like, we need somebody who really understands this. We finally found the Mark Solomon and Mark Levy. They're big time Emmy winners in this sports world. And they just loved this and said, yeah, we want to take this on.
So you approached them about this?
Yeah, through a friend. I did not know them. So a friend knew them and said, can I share this with them and see what they think? And they took this on. But they really helped me. I mean, it was really their vision of the story, to tell the story through my eyes. And to be incredibly vulnerable, like tell the story, all of it, you got to lay it out there. And I had to decide if I was willing to do that. And it's much more compelling. And they really advised me well, but you have to be willing to put yourself in that position.
So how difficult is that for you to go from, you've done things behind the camera, you participate in documentaries, and now they're asking you have to be front and center. You have to expose everything. How difficult is that for you to change your mindset to start saying, I'm going to be the subject of this documentary?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, I clearly don't mind being in front of the camera. That doesn't hurt, right? So, and I'm a very, I didn't mind sharing with them. And they, again, the key issue was we had to build a relationship. I had to trust them, our editors and our producer. There were just four of us, me and my two editors and our producer. And I had to really trust them and allow them to have the ability to trust me and to be open with them. And I talked to a lot of filmmakers who don't have that trust with their editors and their writers. And you can't do a good story without it. Sure. And I really wanted this to be universal. I want somebody who's not Jewish to be able to understand and feel this film, because it talks about all other kinds of things, being a parent, being a sibling, having learning issues, being difficult. I'm a Jewish Israeli swimmer. I could have been an Irish girl. The story is through my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that to be pronounced. And they were incredible in the ability, and I didn't care. I wanted it to be natural, right? I didn't wear makeup. I exposed myself. I really did. I mean, when you see the film, and there are a couple of scenes that took months for me to say, okay.
Yeah.
There were a couple that were like, oh boy, no. I didn't expect that. And I don't know, that's too personal, or that's too, so it's a process.
Well, so the main part from what I see, not the main part is showing you, but one of the parts of the film is you're going to compete again at the 2022 Maccabiah Games. Okay. What was your teammates' reaction when you said, hey, let's do this, now this later?
Well, it was not easy to get people to commit. It took me a long time. Now, I didn't need many, right? I just needed a few. But it took work. It took a lot of work to convince. Some of my teammates were kind of swimming, like me, a little exercise. But it took like convincing to do this, because we're so competitive. And I am the first to say, I'm not going back there and not going to win. Right. I mean, how can I do that? Oh my gosh. It was one of these feelings. And that was very across the board with my teammates. They're like, well, I'm not in great shape. I don't know. But it was not easy. It was not easy.
How difficult was it for all of you? And we're at an older age. We're not back with 1980. We're not teens anymore. So how difficult was you to train, get yourself in that mindset I have to train to compete? Against other people now.
Well, I have to admit, I was not aware that master swimming is so big and so competitive. Mm-hmm. And most of the really elite master swimmers were not Olympians. They got into the sport later in life, and they are good. They are fast, and they are scary, and they are like, wow. I mean, it just all comes back. So yes, I had to train. Ice on my back half the time. I mean, my husband said, should I surgically insert this in you because you're constantly wearing ice? I had to go to physical therapy. It wasn't, it didn't come back so naturally. I was, tearing things and this and that. It was a lot of work, but there was a purpose there that was, it was not just a purpose to get back in the water and compete with my friends. It was a purpose to save my life. I was really struggling emotionally and mentally with our son, with my friend, with all these different things that we all face as we get older. And I needed to get out of that. I needed something. And this was it.
So how cathartic was it for you just to be able to go and be with people that you knew from back then, and do something. Back then, swimming was your safe space. Swimming was your salvation back then, and in many ways, it's come full circle, and it's the same way for you now. So how was that for you, immersing yourself in this safe space again for you?
I mean, as you say that, I'm tearing up. I mean, I'm really tearing up inside because it was exactly that. It was such a release. Mm-hmm. It was such a moment that I hope will last me a lifetime, of that you can get through the tough times, that you can find light again, that you can find a purpose. And it was really the most deeply feeling I had in my entire life, that I was okay with myself.
And you competed for Israel, correct?
Yes. So
you were in the 2022 games. All right, so this is prior to October 7th happening, but it's anti-Semitism has still been going, for the God knows how many years now, just increasing. After October 7th, it exploded. So how is it also getting to hear Hatikva playing for you, standing there?
Again, it takes me back to me not wanting to leave Israel for my first trip in 1971, when we started going as a family. And when I think about that phone call when I made the national team and became Israeli, it means everything to me. Okay, do you want to ask the question again?
Yeah, just getting to hear Hatikva for yourself, and that, seeing the anti-Semitism. And like I said, even this was prior to October 7th, but it's been skyrocketing for the past, it's, in my opinion, it's like the last 15 years or so. It's just been growing and growing and growing. After October 7th, it exploded. But so how is it for you getting to hear that?
No matter if I go back to when I was 15 or back 2 years ago or today, every single time I hear Hatikva, it feels the same. It just fills me up with warmth that I belong somewhere. And you don't have to agree with everything Israel does. It's a country. You don't have to agree with everything Judaism does, but you have to feel, within your heart that we as Jews belong. And I think that the world and history has constantly tried to make us feel that we don't belong. It's not a new feeling. It's been there forever. And we cannot stop pushing and trying and keeping ourselves focused on that we do belong. And I think, that is what so many Jews feel like a lot of times. And for me, swimming for Israel gave me that feeling. It does even today, being in Israel, whether I'm physically there or not. I believe in the state of Israel. I don't always agree with everything they decide. It's a country, just like America. I don't always agree with everything they decide. But as Jews, we have to have Israel. We have to have Israel.
So expanding upon that, actually, going back to Judaism. So you've talked about the anti-Semitism you faced. I'm curious how that's been as an adult filmmaker, because I've seen it in the publishing world. I've seen a lot of anti-Semitism, especially recently in the publishing world. Have you seen it as a filmmaker now?
Well, yes. Yes. I mean, this is my first feature documentary, full-length documentary, and my first experience in film festivals. And we were told right away, even though our film has a universal theme, I'm still this Jewish Israeli, so it falls into that. And we were told early on last year, don't even apply to Toronto. Don't even apply to certain places. They're not going to take you. Yeah. And you might not even get in anywhere. And, everybody's against, the Jews and Israel filmmaking. And it's
Toronto especially. Yeah.
but it's not just there. It's everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, I made this film and nobody's ever going to see it. And also just feeling again, so deflated. Why? because I'm Jewish? That's why you're punishing me? What is wrong with human beings? And, you know, you don't have to go, like you said, this is not a new problem. And, but it is very pronounced everywhere. And in the film world, it especially. Our first film festival was Rhode Island, which was unbelievable. And the fact that we won was, I think, a testament that, you know, there still are good people out there. Right. And I'm a endless optimist, even though days I don't feel that way, but I always try to look at the glass half full. And, you know, I just hope and pray that there is that hope in the future. I think October 7th was so devastating. You know, it felt like the Holocaust, really, a second Holocaust for our generation, feeling that way. And when I go to Israel now, it feels like a cloud is over the country and it needs to be lifted. I don't know how long. I mean, I remember Golda Meir said after the 6-day war, it will take 50 years for the country to recover. Well, this is going to take many lifetimes, I think.
Yeah, I've seen it said, and it's very true. There are, you know, two different types of Jews before October 7th and after. And I always say that it's changed me forever. No matter what else happens, it's changed me forever.
Right. But exactly. I don't think anybody, I think most people feel that way, but we can't stop. Right. We can't stop doing what we need to do. And that's why I think this film is so important, because it doesn't have a political agenda. It's really a love letter to Israel for me. It's where I felt where I belonged, and it's my story. We all have a story. This happens to be mine. And it expresses things that anybody who's sitting in the audience is going to feel something. You're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you will walk, but no matter what you do, when you walk out of this film, you will feel inspired.
So the film is going to be, you're going to be in my neck of the woods in the Miami Film Festival for Parting the Waters. Okay, first, what date will that be shown?
Well, first of all, I am thrilled to be part of the Miami Jewish Film Festival, and it's a real honor. We're one of their opening films at the Miami Theater Center, which seats 400 people. So get a ticket on Thursday, January 15th at 6 o'clock p.m. And it's going to be full of amazing people. And we want everybody to come out and see it and support it and feel it.
So you've been taking this to different film festivals right now, right? So what are some of the more memorable audience responses afterwards that to you, talking about it to you during them?
We had an unbelievable experience at Chelsea Film Festival. Well, first off, we were the only film that got 2 showings because we sold out so quickly. People in the audience were at times standing up and cheering, clapping, crying. You know, there were such emotion during the showing of the film that you can't but help feel it. And at the Chelsea Film Festival, I would say maybe half the audience was Jewish, the other half was not. There was not one political question about Israel. There was not any of that. People wanted to talk about the relationships. They wanted to talk about how I felt. And oh my gosh, there was anti-Semitism in the 70s in Palm Beach. What? People couldn't believe that. They couldn't understand that actually happened. Overwhelming support for this story has been from everybody. Because it really touches people in different ways. I had one young man tell me that there's a scene in the film with my sister that's very, very intense. And he said, you know, that I've never seen made it feel like, I mean, it was real. Now, of course it was, because the camera was rolling and we didn't know it. And he said, you know, I love my sibling, but I have never, nobody's ever got it. Like what you really feel like, and you did. And people were really connecting on different levels. I had a lot of mothers and fathers say, you know, I've never talked about this, but our child has this and what we went through. I'm very honest. I let it all out. I let it all out. And the first time I saw it on the big screen, I was nervous, but now I look forward to it. But every single time it's, like, oh gosh.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone dealing with personal setbacks, or someone who has stepped away from something that they want to come back to it?
Well, first of all, everybody has setbacks. Everybody has difficulties in life. There's not a person who, lots of people hide behind, oh, everything's great, but it's not. Nobody's perfect. My advice is, that was the other part in the film. I had a friend from Florida that I've known since I was 5, and we've been in touch. But anyway, she's come to every single film, and she said to me, Michele, you inspired me to get back to what I loved, which was, she's a great artist, but had put it aside for 40 years. And she said, I feel like a different person. My advice is, what I said to myself is, you can't give up. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but it takes a lot of work, but you got to find it. And you got to step out to an uncomfortable place, but the reward of that place is overwhelmingly better than staying in that box. So there's never an age limit to any of this. And this film saved my life. It wasn't a film to do just to make a film. This was a film I did to save myself.
That's beautiful. And will the film, after all the film festivals, will the film be going out in a wider release, or maybe a streaming service somewhere?
I mean, from your mouth, that's what we want. We're doing a bunch of film festivals, sort of half Universal film festivals, half Jewish film festivals. But yes, the goal is, we would love for this to be on a streaming service so the whole world can enjoy it.
And here's the most important question that everyone wants to make sure that I always get in. How can people follow you and the film on social media?
You can follow us. We have a website, partingthewatersfilm.com, all one word, and our Instagram, partingthewaters_film. And you can follow all of our amazing experiences and film festivals. And please come out and support our film and write to me. I will write you back. You can talk to me anytime.
Michele, I want to thank you for taking the time, for coming on. Such a pleasure getting to speak with you. When I reached out to you, the film looked amazing to me. So I'm hoping to get over to the Miami Jewish Film Festival to see it and meet you. And it's just been incredible. So thank you again for coming on.
You're amazing. Thank you. You make it very easy, and you got to come to the film.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Michele Kuvin Kupfer, and the film is Parting the Waters. Go see it, and please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.